In the last section, we set up our post.js component. In this section, we'll set up our showposts component that will display each individual post along with the comments. So let's create a showpost.js file, and inside let's start with our usual imports. And we also need the dialog box from Material UI as well. And this will be used for a user to edit and delete comments. So let's set up our showpost class with an empty div. Then we can start with an h2 header of just post, since again this is just a single post. Then to actually display the title, we have to do this.props.location.state.post.post.title. So this is a very long property name, so let's break it down and understand how each of these property names works and comes from. So this.props is the standard way to access properties in a class component. .location is actually a given property from React Router, and we have this available to us automatically since we already have React Router set up. .state is actually a property of location, and we set that in the link component in our post.js component. So remember, when in the link component in the to property, we specified state and we set it to the entire post. So this essentially allows the state property to have the entire post available to this property, which is why we can access it in the showpost component with post.post.title. And again, this is the same way we access the title in the post.js component. And we can access the body and the author of each post in the same way as well. And below this post, we want to display all the comments associated with it. So we can start off with the h2 comments tag. And this is going to be an array of comments, so we're going to display them in the same way we did the array of posts. So let's start off with the Turner expression of this.props.comments. And since we're going to be getting it from our Redux store, let's set up our map state to props function. And let's set a property of comments to state.postReducer.comments. And again, this is the exact same pattern we just saw when we set up the posts. And we can also set up our map dispatch to props function and just leave it empty for now. So in the same way we had a render post functional component, let's also create a render comments functional component. And of course it will have a argument of comment and it will be an arrow function. So let's start off with a div, and then to access the actual comment, we'll just do h3 and then inside curly brackets comment.comment.comment. So this may seem a little confusing. So the first comment is the comment argument we just declared in the render comments functional component. The second comment is each comment as a prop that we're going to set up in the functional component. So in the render method, we pass in a prop to this render comments functional component, and that prop is referring to the second prop. And the third dot comment is the actual property of each comment object. And again, comments don't have separate titles and bodies, so it's just one object. And next we need a date created property, which will wrap in a small tag. And then in the paragraph tag, we can do by and then the author of the comment. And next we're going to need a ternary expression that compares the current user ID to the comment user ID. And if true, we can pass in an edit button. And this is how we handle for a user to be able to edit their own comments. And in the onClick method, we can handle a click open function. And this is going to be a helper function we're going to set up in a second. But this will essentially open the dialog box where the editing comment can take place. So let's now set up our local component state in the constructor. So let's do constructor props and then super props, and then this.state and then equal to three properties. So open false, and open is going to control our dialog box. The second argument is comment, which is an empty string, and then the CID, the comment ID, which is also an empty string. And next we have our first helper function, which is handle click open. And this is what we declared in the onClick event of the button in our render comments functional component. So we pass in two arguments, CID and comment, and then we set the state to first open equals true, which will open our dialog box, and then comment equals comment and CID equals CID. And this will set the comment and CID in our local state. And again, this is coming from our render comments functional component. And then we need our handle close helper function, and of course this will close the dialog box and reset all the state. And in the same way we just set up our render post functional component in the last section, we can do the same thing for the render comments here. So inside the Turner expression, we need to call the .map function on the comments array. And then each comment will be passed individually to the render comments functional component. So in our render comments functional component, let's first set the prop to comment, which will equal each comment. And then we need a second prop of cur user ID or current user ID. We'll leave it blank for now, but this will essentially hold the current user's ID. And finally, we need a key because this is an array and it will just be comment.cid. So before we set the current user ID, we need to get it from the Redux state. So let's declare a property called dbProfile and then set it to state.authReducer.dbProfile. And remember, dbProfile is just the name of the property that we set in the auth reducer. So now we can pass in the user ID to the cur user ID prop. And to make it a little bit nicer, let's also format our code a little bit. And we also need a form that will handle actually submitting the comments. So let's create that here. So form and then on submit is going to equal a handle submit function, which we'll set up in a little bit. And we just need one text field for our comment. And of course, we need the submit button and we just have our closing form tag. And next we need our dialog box. So we can start with dialog and then we need to set the open prop to this.state.open. And this will allow us to toggle the dialog box. Then after that, we have the onClose prop, which takes in a function to close the dialog box. And this can of course just be this.handleClose. And then we have an area and then labeled by prop, which is alert dialog title, which is going to be the ID of the dialog title. We'll see in a second. And then area described by, which is the same thing. It's just the ID that's going to be associated with the dialog content. Then we have our dialog text, which of course takes the ID of alert dialog title. And then our title is going to be edit comment. And here we can close the dialog title tag. And after this, we need the dialog content, which will first take the dialog content text and remember the ID of alert dialog description. And then we need a input tag here. And this is going to be a type of text and its value is going to be pre-populated with the comment because the user will need to edit this comment. And we can pass in the function of this.handle comment change, which we will set up in a second to the onChange event handler. So let's set up handle comment change and remember to pass in event as the keyword. And in the arrow function, we'll need to use this.setState and then comment equal to event.target.value. And this will essentially allow us to keep track of the comment when the user is editing it in the dialog box. So back in our dialog box, we can close off the dialog content text and then create a new dialog actions tag. And this will contain all our buttons and actions we want to set up in the dialog box. So the first thing we'll do is create a agree button. And in the onClick method, we can do this.handleUpdate, which we will set up in a second. And we also need to close the dialog box when the user hits agree. So we can do the second argument to the arrow function, we can do this.state open false. And again, this is going to be a confirmation to updating the comment. And of course, it's going to have an Axios request. And again, we'll see this in a second. The second button we need is a cancel button. And again, this is just a simple one that just closes the dialog box. And finally, we have a delete button. And of course, it's just going to delete the comment. And again, we'll set this up in a second, but just pass in this.handle delete comment to the onClick method. And remember to wrap both the function calls in the agree button with curly brackets. Since we're calling two functions in an arrow function, we need to wrap them both in a curly brackets, otherwise it's not going to work. So let's now begin setting up our Axios request. The first thing we need to do is get all the comments from the database, and we'll do this in the component didMount lifecycle method. So inside our lifecycle method, we do axios.get and then /API/get all post comments. But in this get request, we also need parameters since we don't want every comment for all the posts. We just want the comments associated with a certain post. And again, how we do that is by passing in a params object to the get request. And this params object will contain the post ID, which is again associated with every comment. And again, we saw this in the SQL section of how that's set up. So just refer back to that one if you're not sure. And remember, we have the entire post available to us in this showposts component, and we saw that before with this.props.location. So the same way we access the title and the body of the post, we can also access the post ID. So we can do the same thing. We can just do this.props.location.state, then post.post.pid. And again, we need our .then statement call, and we pass in res response. And let's set up the actions that are going to be dispatched to work with this Axios request. So in our map dispatch to props function, let's do set comments equal to an arrow function comments, and then dispatch actions.fetch post comments. And then now we can go back to our Axios.get request, and then it's going to be this.props.set comments. And remember, we pass in rest.data, not just the entire response. Then followed by our error handling. And that's it. That's all we need to do to get all the comments associated with a certain post. Now let's create our handle submit function, and this will be used to save the comment to the database. So let's first set the event.prevent default keyword, because remember, this is being called from a form and we don't want our browser to reload. And then we do const user ID, and this user ID is going to be coming from our DB profile. And we saw this before. And next we have the post ID, which is going to actually be coming from our React router. Remember, so this.props.location.state.post.post, and then .post ID. And then we need the username, which is also coming from a Redux state from the DB profile. And finally we combine all of these into a data const. So comment would be event.target.comment.value, because remember, that's the text field ID we set. And then the rest of our properties can be set just by the variable name. And next we have our Axios post request. And again, remember, post just means we're sending data to the database. So we do /API/post/comment2db, and then we just pass in the data variable we just created as a second argument. Then we do .then, and then we console.log the rest. And we do our error handling, and then we also want to redirect the user to the main forum after they submit this comment. And let's set a millisecond timer of 700. And now let's go to our handle update, which will handle editing a comment. So first, of course, we need the comment that we're going to send to the database. So we do this.state.comment, and remember, this comment is set in local state by the dialog box. So this ensures that if the user made any changes, they will be updated automatically to the local state, which ensures we're getting exact edited comment that the user wants to save to the database. And then we have our comment ID, and of course this is set when a user opens the dialog box. So this is set automatically in local state, and this again ensures we have the right comment ID. And then we have our usual user ID, post ID, and username. And like we've been doing, let's combine all of these into the data const. And next we need our Axios.put request. So we do API/put/comment2db. And in the same way we post comments, we also just pass in data as a second argument to the put method as well. And then we do .then res and our error handling. And then the final one, we just redirect the user back to the main forum after they submit. So finally, we need our handle delete comment function. And all we need to delete the comment is the comment ID. And of course, since the dialog box opens, it sets the comment ID automatically, which is why we can just access it with this.state.id. And we need our Axios.delete statement, and we pass in the CID as a JavaScript object where the first property is data, and then the data itself is a JavaScript object, which is CID. And then we console.log the response in our error handling, and here we'll also redirect the user to the main forum. And now we're done with all our CRUD operations for this component. And let's look back and see if we made any mistakes. And this is a little bit harder than it seems, so please forgive me if I make any typos, but I will go back and fix them in real time. So yes, our first one is in the component didMount lifecycle method. For params, it's actually another object, which is itself an object. And the first property should be post ID, which equals the post ID. And yes, the next one, we do need to pass the event keyword to the handle submit function. Great, we're now done setting up the showposts component. In the next section, we'll set up the user profile dashboard.